I'm the great-grandson of Bill Dean, who graduated in Buckland in 1909. I'm the great-grandson of Gladys Hunt, class of 1911. My grandparents, Joe Dean, graduated in 1939, and Mary Stice in 1941. My grandpa, Emmett Sappington, graduated from Shelby High School, but he did some postgraduate work here, and in 1937, I think, he met my grandma, Jessie Carter, who was a graduate in 1937. My father is Kenneth Sappington, class of 68, and Mary Jo Dean, class of 67. Today I'm going to speak on... There is another generation with this. Lori Hanson and Lisa Finney have all had another generation of the Dean family that come through. So is that five generations? So very proud of that. But today I'm going to speak on behalf of our graduating class in 1994. I know you all came here tonight not to hear me talk, but to catch up with other people, so I promise to keep this brief. But I would like to recognize everybody in our class. We tend to all get away from Buckland, so not everybody could make it. But we have Tamara Coyne, who's our valedictorian, Brandy Beatty, Sean Chase, John Irby, Justin Gillespie, Laura Grinder, Nick Gullick was our salutatorian, Lawrence Jackson, Carrie Jenkins, Amy Jury, Jerry Payne, Becky Rice, Dusty Riley, myself, Jimmy Slater, and Brian Teashaw. Our class flower was a white rose, and our colors were black, teal, and silver. Our class motto was, when we were gone, we are remembered only by what we left behind. We were taught how to write our names in kindergarten by Miss Green. In first grade, we started reading with Miss Arnold. Second grade was Miss Johnson, third, Miss Belmer. Fourth grade, Miss Malloy read Indian in the Cupboard and other books to us. And then in fifth grade, we had Miss Stuber. Sixth grade was Miss Ware. In fifth and sixth grade, we switched classes, so Miss Ware would teach history to the fifth graders, and Miss Stuber then would teach science. So it was a good prep to start moving into junior high and changing classes. When we moved into junior high and high school, our math was taught by Mr. Chu, science, Mr. McIntosh, and Miss Shaw. We wondered why we had to take senior English with Mr. Gardner, and then he made us do this public speech thing, which didn't seem appropriate at the time, but we did. We learned history from Mr. Trollinger. Typing was with Miss Matlick was a requirement, and again, we didn't think we would need to learn to type, but now everything is on the computers typing. And then we also were taught the basics of professional and personal accounting by Miss Matlick. We tortured substitute teachers. We made a few cry. We even had one leave in the middle of the day and vow never to come back.
I heard about that.
and then we would, after school, we would ride home after ball practice with some friends, maybe in the back of the truck. We would meet after school to go fishing or swimming at a buddy's house. Does any of that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar to what you guys did? Our parents fussed about our latest fashion trends. We did the acid wash jeans. It was terrible. We pinch rolled our jeans at the bottoms, and we did all this crazy stuff with our hair. Some people, I think, did like the guys would do perms in the back and shave little lines in your head. Our parents hated that, but apparently they forgot about tie-dyeing their clothes, wearing bell-bottoms, and all the crazy stuff they did with their hair in the 60s and 70s. Tonight I just wanted to talk briefly about how I learned how big Buckland really is. And like hitching a ride after practice or fishing or swimming after school, I bet some of the things that I have to say sound familiar to you too. Maybe you could have similar stories. Buckland, Missouri city limits is a total land area of 1.18 square miles. I remember when the city limit sign said 714 people. The last census of 2010, the total was 467 people. So there was 228 households, 132 families residing in the city, and a population density of 395.8 inhabitants per square mile. Sorry for reading that off here, but you heard how bad my math was earlier, so I want to make sure I get that right. For a point of reference, I currently live in Grain Valley, Missouri. It's 25 miles east of Kansas City. The total land area is 6.7 square miles. There are 12,854 people with a population density of 803 people per square mile. So it's twice as big. I'm trying to do mathy, I'm not even going to do that. Okay. So basically what we do is we just cram a whole bunch of people in together, and we really don't know each other besides who's across the street from you, who's behind you, and who's to the left and right of you. Growing up, my dad owned the lumberyard, Sappington Lumber here, and I can remember feeling like a big shot when I was allowed to ride my bike to town. Little did I know that I was under watch the entire way. My mom had this connection, this web of friends that I didn't know about that would watch me. So Mom could see me go around the corner, and then she would call someone else and she'd say, hey, Scott's going to, Betty's looking at me because I think she was part of it. I caught on later. And she could see me go around the corner, and then Mom would call Betty and say, hey, Betty, Mom, Scott's riding his bike up to the lumberyard. Can you watch out for him? And then Betty could see me so far, and then Mom would call the next person and say, okay, he should be around in the corner. I think he's coming. Okay. So I felt like such a big guy then, but little did I know the entire town of Buckland was watching me. I was never really on my own. They were watching me to ride my bike around the corner just to make sure I was safe. I was never really afraid of the police. I was more afraid to disappoint Mom and Dad, as I knew they were watching by that time. The day I turned 16, I picked up my cousin. We were going to go to Sonic for a Coke. Before I left town, I got pulled over. I didn't even have a license yet. It was just a piece of paper. The ink was still on it. I handed it to John Wright, and he just kind of looked at me. I was going 45 and a 35, right in front of Aunt Lou's house. And he told me to slow down, and so off we went. I really shouldn't have been surprised that before I got home, Mom knew, because once again, the entire town of Buckland was watching. When I graduated from Buckland, I started college at Missouri Valley in Marshall, Missouri. I was still surrounded by a lot of familiar faces. I had classmates. My brother was going to school there. My sister-in-law, my future sister-in-law was going to school there. I had friends from Marceline and Buckland and Brookfield all there. And so it made for a really easy transition. And it really wasn't that much different from here. We had a good group of people, and we took care of each other, and we helped keep each other out of trouble, relatively. As I graduated from college, I had a choice to do a 6-month internship either at Coffeyville Community College, at Missouri State University in Springfield, or at Embry-Riddle University in Daytona Beach. Right. So, as nearly any single 21-year-old would do, I chose to move to Florida. That 6-month internship extended into a whole year. Then I developed into a full-time job, and I ended up living there for 6 years. In Daytona, I knew nobody. For the first time in my life, nobody was watching for me to come around the corner on my bike. Or so I thought. I knew how to make friends, so that really wasn't a problem. And my city friends, they'd give me a hard time about being from a small town. They'd say things like, oh, this is a stoplight, and let's take Scott to the mall and show him where the mall is. It was all in good fun, but I knew what those things were. Of course, we could go to Columbia. It would take a couple hours to get there at the time, but it just had to go a little bit further for these type of things. And I would joke back to them and describe Buckland as Mayberry, except we only had Andy. We didn't have Barney, because we weren't big enough. And if they didn't know the Andy Griffith Show, well, then we were off on the wrong foot anyway. They didn't get my joke, so I was joking. It was good fun, but I knew that I had a leg up on these guys because I was from a small town, and not despite being from a small town. I would ask them things like, do you know how to snap green beans? Can you drive a tractor? If you were in trouble in your hometown, could you go to any door and know that they would take care of you and help you? I know it was my great uncle Saidi that told my brother one time, when you meet someone and they ask where you're from, always start at Buckland. At first I was surprised at how close to Buckland I would get. I would always start with naturally, I'm from North Missouri, a small town called Buckland. If they didn't know that, I would say Marceline, Brookfield, Macon, Chillicothe, Kirksville, Lynn County, Kansas City, St. Louis. And at first I was surprised about how close we could really make a connection to Buckland. Sometimes it wasn't until you would get the, oh yeah, Missouri. But then sometimes you would get, okay, well, Lynn County, I know somebody, I used to know somebody, or Chillicothe, or it was always nice to make a connection. And at first I really was surprised at how close I could get to Buckland. When I was in Florida, I met a girl, and she was from Kansas City. As it turns out, she used to work with my sister-in-law in a store in Independence Mall. So, a Buckland connection. This is my wife, Mandy. She's the girl from the city. Now remember, we were living in Central Florida, and that's about 1,500 miles from Buckland. Before you know it, it was spring of 2000. My girlfriend and I were enjoying Bike Week, they call it, when there's about 500,000 people come to this motorcycle rally in Daytona. And there's all kinds of things going on. There's vendors selling t-shirts. They have these motorcycle races. It's a lot of fun, but there's 500,000 people invade the town. I was wandering around town and looking at these t-shirt vendors, and I run into somebody, a familiar face. It was Cassie Riggs. Cassie went to junior high with us. So we're 1,500 miles away, 500,000 people, a city full of t-shirt vendors, and I run into someone from a class of 20. Moving back to Missouri in 2004, I took a part-time job working at Linens and Things. I was a greeter there. That was fun. Helping make ends meet until I could find a full-time job in my field. And in the 2 months that I worked there, I ran into everybody. I ran into cousins, college friends, a few people from Buckland, all sorts of people, 2 months. My wife worked there for 6 months. She's from Independence, Missouri, graduated from Blue Springs, which is all about 5 miles from there, and I don't think she ran into anybody that she knew. A few years later, while I was working, I think it was actually last summer even, I was working downtown Kansas City, and I mentioned to a colleague that I was going to Buckland for a homecoming, and she was stunned. It turns out she was the granddaughter of Orville Simmons, who's from the Buckland area, and his family. I'd worked with this girl for about 3 years and had many conversations with her about all kinds of different things, but it never came up where anybody was from. It's just strange that another Buckland connection would be made. Some people might think that it's a small world, but if you're from Buckland, you know better than that. You know, most of my friends not from Linn County, they graduated in classes of hundreds of other kids. But when you get to talk to them, really they only had a close-knit of maybe 10 or 15 kids that they knew. Everybody else in their high school, they were all strangers. When I went to school here, probably similar to you guys, I might not have known the name of every kid that was here, but I knew their cousin, or I knew their brother, or I knew their mom and dad. I had a connection to nearly everybody in here. It was much larger than just the school of hundreds of kids where you only knew 10 people. And that connection that we made, it made you feel like you're a part of something a lot bigger than what we really realized at the time. Even my 6-year-old notices that when we come to Grandma and Papa's house that we wave at everybody because they probably know Grandma and Papa somehow. So Buckland High School really taught us more than what we learned in algebra class. And I did a poor job with math. I'm so glad Mr. Chu's not here. Math and algebra. Mr. Gardner's senior English class, or even Miss Malik's accounting classes. It really did help us get a firm foundation to build our morals and characters on, and we take that into life with us. It taught us how to be part of something bigger than the 10 friends in the class that we had, and how to be part of a bigger community, a much larger community, and that really is something to be proud of. After we graduated in '94, our lives took us down different roads. We served our country in the armed forces. We became police officers, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. We worked in the music industry. We became teachers, arborists, mechanics, farmers, and farmers' wives. We moved away to Florida, Washington, Georgia, South Carolina, Iowa, Kansas. Probably missed a few states in there. And we moved away. We started our careers and our lives in faraway places, but whenever we did, we took a little bit of Buckland with us whenever we went. When you sign up for all these social media accounts like Facebook or Twitter, they ask a few basic questions like your name and your age, these type of things. But then they ask 2 other separate questions. They ask, where do you currently live and where are you from? Where do you currently live changes our life many times. But where are you from? It stays with us the entire life. Not only does it help friends find us that we've lost touch with, but it also shows the world a little bit who we are. And I'm very proud to mark where you are from as Buckland, Missouri. So as we leave here tonight, remember that we're all taking a piece of Buckland with us out.